Waterfall enrichments are supposed to make your outbound campaigns perform better by giving you better data and stacking more providers. But honestly, here's the truth. If you're anything like me, you probably end up paying 3 times more and it absolutely destroys your deliverability. So over here at Finding Mail, we actually work with thousands of sales teams. And if you haven't heard of Finding Mail before, for whatever reason in the outbound marketing space, Clay.com just ranked us as the best work email finder, ahead of any of the waterfall solutions that just stack 20 providers together. So from the inside out, we've seen what actually works and why so many teams are successful and unsuccessful with outbound marketing. What they don't tell you is what actually matters, which is data quality. And this is really the stuff that waterfall vendors don't want you to understand because their whole business depends on you using their systems. Today, I'll be breaking down 4 reasons as to why more providers don't necessarily correlate with better results for your outbound marketing and what actually matters when it comes down to data quality. Let's break it down for you. The first problem is the one that actually makes it fall apart, and it's that it's baked in the business model itself. Here's kind of what I mean. The whole pitch that the waterfall enrichment verifiers and vendors will tell you is that stacking more providers, so 15, 20, 30 providers, will actually find more emails for your data. And it sounds very logical and very practical. But what ends up happening is quality always serves better than quantity, and that's what actually determines your results. The only thing that determines your results is the quality of the data, not how many times you can segment it in a waterfall system. And from what we've seen, quality providers don't want to even be in waterfalls. And again, if you think about it from a logical standpoint, if you're a premium provider that provides good data and good systems and you're always reliable, why would you let yourself get bundled in a product where you're resold for pennies on the dollar just to make something look a little bit more special? You wouldn't, and that kills the reliability of your product and service and margins within the product itself, basically just devaluing your entire business as a whole. What ends up happening is these waterfall solutions stack budget providers and then order them from cheapest to most expensive. And they can sell you the entire package at a 5x markup, and it's extremely inflated. So what ends up happening is you're paying a premium, which isn't bad, but it's for a extremely budgeted data set that is accessible for a much less cost on the dollar. The next issue is way more important. And this is exactly what kills outreach campaigns without you even seeing it coming. Every single data provider obviously isn't perfect, and maybe even some of the best still have a 1 to 2% error margin. With a single quality provider, that 1 to 2% is very justifiable and it makes sense. So let's say you stack a waterfall enrichment and every single block has a 1 to 2% error margin for data. That percentage stacks up. By the time you get to the end of the table and the end of the segment, it's time to export your list. You have anywhere from like a 7 to 10% faulty data metric within your table, when in reality, you could have kept it at a 1 to 2% if you kept things simple and streamlined. And the most sneaky part is this won't actually show up in any emails or DKIM records or even email verification. It flies under the radar, and it's something that just takes a hold of your outbound campaigns without you knowing it, and you don't exactly know where the cause is even coming from. Because what errors could be traced back to waterfall enrichments? Not the wrong email, not anything like that. The email technically works, it won't bounce, but the data is filtered and segmented so much down a table that has a completely different intent-based target from the initial decision maker that you outreach to for one of your campaigns. It just complicates the entire process of everything, and you can't necessarily pinpoint what went wrong and where. So you actually end up paying premium prices that kind of tank your sender reputation and response rates and buyer intent, and the metrics look fine the entire time, and everything just kind of ends up being a scramble. Most people will stop at data quality, but the third and one of the most important problems is that companies only care about one thing, and that's functioning and moving data properly and legally. When you apply a waterfall solution, what ends up happening is your prospect's data gets processed 10, 15, or maybe even 20 times through various different third-party sources and different functionalities. These are the things that happen behind the scenes, and each one is another link in the data processing chain that it potentially gets messed up, could affect the entire reputation down the line. I'm not a lawyer and I don't claim to be a lawyer, but we've talked to a lot of compliance teams and we know this makes them nervous. And obviously, if you're selling in European markets or anything upmarket like enterprise or maybe a larger upmarket company, this is something you really have to seriously think about as a provider. And the last point I have to bring to you guys today is this is probably the most frustrating because it's where people think they're being clever and actually making money on the back end, but they're losing so much money on the front end, they never end up recouping it. We call this imaginary gain. For instance, any 1,000 email lookups, Waterfall Solutions typically will charge 2 to 3 times more than a quality single provider. So that's just the baseline. Obviously, if you get the data flat out, you get it for much cheaper for a much more quality source than to have it vetted out through 1,000 different tables. And by the end of it, it's all fragmented. And here's the thought process behind it. When you split your volume across 4 different providers, you can't really hit the pricing tiers that give you the most savings. So when you can consolidate into one proper provider, money aside, you're getting the same data for a much better amount on paper, but the real payoff is that you don't have to jump through as many hoops and figure out what's going wrong and reverse engineer the issues in your outbound campaigns because things are already flowing smoothly. Now, obviously, we have a take and a perspective on this, so let me show you some third-party data. Clay ran a benchmark across all email finders in the industry, and they have no stake in this. FindEmail came out as the best work email finder for data quality. And yes, this benchmark did include other Waterfall enrichment resources like Better Contact and Full Enrich, in case you're wondering. And yes, these platforms do stack 10, 20, 30 providers each and have all these crazy data tables that look like they're really helping out your campaigns. The result of that, FindEmail came out with 83% coverage, Full Enrich came out with about 80% coverage, and Better Contact came out with 76% coverage. So as you can tell, a single quality provider will beat out most of the Waterfall softwares and systems on both quality and coverage. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how many providers you can stack, it's about the quality of the data and your methodology behind sending out outreach campaigns, not putting them through thousands of tables and spraying and praying. Honestly, to be completely fair, one of the only areas where Waterfall can actually make sense is if you need phone numbers. And different providers genuinely have different databases with different coverage. But obviously, for phone numbers, try multiple different sources that can actually improve your results, and just know that the margins and all the number games still apply. But after watching this video, you pretty much have 1 to 2 sources of action. The first source of action is you can continue to pay 2 to 3 times more for essentially just stacked budgeted data that just compounds errors. And yes, this quietly destroys your deliverability and reputation as an actual outreach business or as somebody that collects data and provides services out in the marketplace. Or you can obviously try out FindEmail, the provider that Clay ranked #1 for both quality and coverage at a fraction of the cost. So obviously the link's down there in the description for you guys to check it out. You can compare it to your own list, an existing list, or a list that you're going to create for a possible outreach campaign in the future. Try it for yourself, see if it helps out with coverage, see if it helps out with accuracy, or whatever you're doing right now currently. We'll see you in the next one.